So welcome to the show, my dear friend, Lee
Oh,
Harris.
thank you so much. It's so nice to be on your show, and it's always just gorgeous to be with you.
Can I just reflect for you for a second, Lee? I had really the privilege and the opportunity to be on your incredible podcast, Impact the World, which, I think that is probably the podcast I got the most feedback of my life on of any
Oh,
podcast I've done. I got emails. I got people were like, whoa, you know Lee Harris, you're on Lee's show.
oh.
It was really awesome to connect in that way and to just kind of go as deep as we went. And I shared in your intro, I'm very blessed to have you as a friend in my life. And I think about, the times that I get the chance to hang out with you, to hang out with your husband, Steven, and we just go deep and we talk. We are a talking people.
You were one of my absolute favorite conversations of the whole of season one. And I said that to you at the time. And then, it's very rare that after we do a show, I will speak to a guest for 3 hours. And that's kind of what happened to us. So yeah, I feel exactly the same way about you and everything that you do in the world too. So
Mm,
yay.
Thank you. I have to share that story actually since we started there. And then I have so many things I want to get into. But Lee and I went on Lee's incredible show, Impact the World, which you have to bookmark and check out when you get the chance. And Lee has an amazing compound, a huge, beautiful, creative office. And we were there and we started talking, and shout out to Wendy, my dear friend works with Lee. We started talking, and at first it was just like, wow, this was so amazing. It was so great to meet you. Next thing I know, we are both cross-legged on the floor in the center of your office.
Right over
All
there.
the lights are off. Everyone has left and we didn't even notice. And I thought we'd been talking for 20 minutes. Like I was like, oh, okay, well, it's been about 20 minutes. I was supposed to be way across town. And I was like, let me get up, let me check the time. And we both looked up and we said, we've been sitting here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it felt like a second. It felt like a second. And I'm just, moments like that are rare and beautiful when you get a chance to get stuck in a little time vortex with another soul. So it was very telling.
It was. And it was also super divinely orchestrated because we normally, when we do in studio shows, we have our videographer, Patrick. And so we normally do two. And you were supposed to be the first of two. And our second guest, there was an issue. And so that didn't happen. So it was like the schedule
Yeah.
opened up for it to happen. It was
Uh,
beautiful.
uh, uh. So, Lee, I want to start from the beginning with you. And you have an amazing new book that is out now that we're going to talk about really extensively. But I want to get grounded in, your work has a global reach, and it's permeated in a way that, especially for the time that you came into being, was so rare on this planet. The work that you do is really the work for those on the awakened path. It is about expanding our consciousness. It is about remembering the fullness of who we are, and then also opening to our own intuitive abilities and to our own gifts of higher connection. As someone that is so gifted as a psychic channel, someone that has such an activated and elevated third eye and crown chakra, how did you even begin to, one, notice that about yourself, and two, accept that about yourself? Because it is a completely different internal and external experience than the majority of the planet are having.
Wow. So, okay. So I would say the accepting that about myself has been the far longer road. And
Ah,
and I don't know about you. I mean, I, I think we're all so multi-layered.
hmm,
Like there are times I forget A, what I do in the world, and B, that that's my way of seeing and perceiving things, and that that's different to many other people, because like we're, oh, now I'm having this conversation with this friend, and now I'm a son, and now I'm a brother, and now I'm, all the different multidimensional parts of ourselves that sometimes we focus so intently on one that we forget all those other parts. So I would
Yeah.
say accepting that about myself in a weird way, honestly, doing it as a job,
Mm.
like hyper accelerated that for me. I would have been able to
Mm.
compartmentalize and deny a lot more effectively if I hadn't ended up doing it as a job. And even in the job side of it, and I use that term as in it became what I was hired by people for, and it became my work. And after 2 years of part time readings, I went full time because I couldn't keep up with demand, and it didn't quite make
Um,
sense for me to do two jobs at that point. But I think even after like 5 years of personal readings, so by about 2009, 2010, little part of me went, oh, wow, you do this thing. And, so I think there's
mm.
always, for me, there's always like a new level of awakening around who we are, how we're perceived, does any of it matter anyway, kind of stuff. But I think your question is so pertinent because so many of us, I believe, struggle to accept that we are tapped into this energy source because
Mm.
most of us weren't raised believing it was even possible. I know I wasn't. So um I think what happened for me was I literally got donked on the head. I mean, and I don't mean I literally got donked on the head, but spiritually I got donked on the head one day. So I was a very, I think, like many sensitives or awakened people, I had a really tricky childhood. And my tricky childhood was internalized. It wasn't,
Mm.
there were issues I was having with the outside world, but I came from, a loving family and a good family and all that stuff. I don't have any horror stories within my family in that way, but I
Bless.
definitely couldn't. Yeah, I think in my late teens, my sexuality caused a rift with my parents for a good number of years. We had to do some healing around that later,
Mm.
but apart from that, but nobody was there to teach me about my sensitivity. So I turned it on myself, which is what many of us will do. So I was at Weight Watchers age 10. Like I was the only 10-year-old at Weight Watchers, and I had bulimia and all kinds of food
Oh.
issues. That was kind of one of the ways I played that out as a kid. So I started to get a little bit happier when my life became more creative. I moved college. So in England, we call college 16 to 18. I think that might be high school here in the US. But
Yeah.
yeah, I went to this creative college. It was a mixed gender college. I'd been sent to an all boys school from the age of 11 to 16, which was a disaster for me. Not only just being with all boys, and I understood women more than men at that time, but also it was so scientific and so sports and just all the things that I wasn't
Mm.
aligned with. So when I got this freedom, age 16, because I went to an environment that was a much better plant pot for me to be able to grow in, that was when my spiritual and my
Mm.
healing journey started. And I got fascinated by metaphysics, and I loved a tarot reading. And when I'd go for a tarot reading, I'd be like, this energy makes sense to me. Like, and I'd go and tell my friends I had a tarot reading, and the really open ones would be like, oh, great, I want to go. Or, yeah, I go for those. And then there'd be a whole load of people going, well, that's a load of nonsense. And I'd be thinking, well, it makes more sense to me than some of this nonsense that we're all playing out. But what happened for me was what I thought was a personal passion, which was healing. What I thought was the thing I did at the weekends and the books that I read at night. When I was 22 years old, very pivotal thing happened for me. I was working at Glastonbury Music Festival, amazing festival, for Greenpeace for fundraising. It was an incredible,
Wow.
what a nice thing. You get to go and fundraise for Greenpeace at this incredible music festival. And, if anyone who's ever been to a music festival knows a lot goes on at a music festival. And I don't know whether it was the heightened energies or what was going on, but that weekend, somehow I started reading people's palms. I would hold their hand and I would get information. And I don't know whether it began as a joke or because a friend of mine who knew that I played with tarot cards and could kind of read a bit on cards suggested it. And then, of course, it spread like wildfire around the group. And I ended up doing, I don't know, 25, of course, free palm readings for people that weekend. And everyone was like, wow, how do you know that stuff? And so I was like, I don't know. You're the one that, I can just tell you what I'm getting, but you're the one that has to justify it, I guess. So that was the beginning. And then about 6 months after that, I heard the voice of my guides. And even though I'd heard of channelers and I'd heard that some people could speak to their guides, that wasn't like a drive of mine. That, I was
Mm.
curious. I thought, oh, that's interesting. But that wasn't really where my passion lay. But they basically said, we've been talking to you since you were a kid. You just kind of phased us out around 6 or 7 when life got harder for you and you disconnected from us. We've always been here. And they showed me a sequence of happenings that took place through my childhood that suddenly made sense of their presence in my life that I
Wow.
couldn't see or hear. And so when I met them, I would say that accepting them was pretty immediate because once I'd
Mm.
realized, oh, this isn't multiple personality disorder, because of course, you think, well, hang on, I'm hearing this voice and
Yeah.
it knows things I don't know, and it's very useful. I did lots of tests over a period of months where I would ask all these kinds of questions, personal, universal, and I was always blown away by what came back. And so the
Mm.
presence of them really allowed me to deepen my already existing intuitive ability where I could tap in on a more human level to what I'm feeling, sensing messages. And that was kind of it. I think
Yeah.
then, it was readings for a few friends for a few years. And then after a few years, a friend who had a newsletter with 300 people on it, which, bear in mind, this is 2004. So I
Oh
know
my
now we're
goodness.
all very familiar with
That was like
newsletters
a
and
million
websites.
back
It
then.
was, yeah, I mean, oh God, I was like,
Yeah.
300 people. Wow. So she said she'd send out information about me and would I ever consider doing it as a service? And so thanks to her and my
Wow.
willingness to say yes, and it began and it never stopped.
Wow. 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 How did connecting with your guides and the way that you described it was so beautiful, and especially, something I'm really pulling from what you said, which I know those listening are connecting to, especially for those that do feel like they have access to a deeper wisdom or to more of an inner knowing. When you spoke to kind of running tests, kind of being a spiritual scientist, you're having experiments with yourself. And what I really recognized in hearing you say that was, you were in practice with your intuition. Your heart was
Hmm.
open. You knew there was opportunity to bring more things in. And so you created a practice to be clear on the messaging that you were getting, on the ways that you were connecting. Any other thoughts on how to begin to kind of court, to foster, to cultivate that energy for any that are resonating with this?
Mm. Great question, because I'm a big advocate of us learning to channel for ourselves. And I'm an advocate not necessarily of you connecting with a guide or another planet or however it shows up. I'm
Mhm.
just an advocate of connect with your soul, connect with your higher self. And that's enough.
Yeah.
We can sit and have a conversation with our higher self, and that's enough. I will say this before I share with you what I suggest around that. Um, one of the things that I feel that we as a culture, and hopefully it's changing more now, but we as a culture have around intuition is because we have been separated from it culturally for so long. And of course, there are cultures on the planet and places on the planet right now where that isn't the case. But, we're here in the Western world talking about it from a Western perspective. There is a tendency to the opposite end of the extreme of denying that it exists is
Mm.
giving it way more power than your humanity, or thinking, oh, my
Mm.
guide is better than me. I'm just the wounded human messing everything up. So my guide comes along and tells me to do, well, I better do it. And I'm like, ooh, 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 ooh. Like I'm like, no, 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 back up the car, because I definitely did it. Like my first few years of spiritual workshops, self growth workshops, I did that thing that I think is woven into our culture where somebody who is able to facilitate a really powerful healing for you, or guide a workshop well, or has some kind of spiritual ability, if you view their ability as superior to yours, there is this tendency to give our power away. That's why we have the
Mm.
guru culture that we have and the cult culture that we have. So I'm a big fan. Like, one of the things I say is use channeling as part of a balanced diet, and let it be a great way of guiding and teaching yourself as a human being. You're not abdicating responsibility to your guides or to your soul and saying, okay, I'm
Right.
just a useless puppet down here, I'll do whatever you say. No, it's about listening to those soul whispers and allowing your humanity to open up more and more to more embodied soul energy as we go through life. And for
Mm.
all of us, that's a stop-start process. You have an epiphany for 3 weeks and it's incredible, and then you're like crying for a week and you're like, what happened? I lost the epiphany. No, all that happened was you raised the
Accurate.
ceiling. Yeah. Right. And now you're like excavating the basement. You just
Yeah.
created a new penthouse in your house and you've got this incredible view. And then you go back down to the basement and you go, oh, it smells a bit down here. You didn't know it smelled
Mm.
because you didn't have anything to compare it to. So I think understanding that when we channel for ourselves, when we speak to our soul, when we speak to our higher self, have the same level of reverence and respect for that higher part of yourself, or that wisdom, that you would have for a beloved therapist or a beloved teacher. But if we really are growing and paying attention, eventually that beloved therapist and teacher, even if we're forever grateful for them for what they did for us, we know that they're a human. We know that they're an equal. They might be gifted in that area, but we must never denigrate ourselves and pedestal them, because that's when we run into all kinds of trouble. So that's my disclaimer, first
Mm.
of all.
So
So
beautiful. Thank you for saying all of that.
it's so important, right? And I
Mhm.
can say that as somebody who got entangled in some of that stuff in my first amount of years, and then it was one of the most interesting things I noticed as I had the opportunity to be a teacher for groups and in workshops around the world. I was struck by how much that syndrome exists, and I would see it
Mhm.
playing out in other
Mhm.
people's audiences or groups. And I'm like, oh, this is one of the areas we really need to heal in our community. So the way I say it, and many people who are listening and watching you, I'm sure, will have already done something like this. Sit down for 5 minutes with a pen and a paper, or I often do notes on my iPhone because it's handy, it's there, and then I have those notes available to me a week later if I want to reference what was said. I always
Mm.
just start with the date, and if I need a prompt question, I ask, how am I doing? Question mark. How am I doing? Question mark. That's what I
Mm.
start with. But yours could be something that feels true to you. You might say, what does my soul want to tell me today? What message can you
Mm.
give me, dear higher self? So pick something that feels true for you. And really that sentence becomes the bridge, the permission slip, and the invitation to receive some higher wisdom. And then just write what you get. And it might be 2 sentences and it might be 3 paragraphs. And that's it. Now, a lot of people go, oh, it must be more complicated. No, it really doesn't have to be complicated. It's just about beginning that relationship. And if you're blocked at first, maybe you need to do a few things like put some nice music on or meditate for 10 minutes before, and just keep trying and just keep holding space. And if you get frustrated that nothing's happening on the first couple of days, go, oh, that's interesting. I'm frustrated. Do I
Mm.
trust it will come eventually? Yeah, I do. Do I trust there's a reason it's not coming today? Okay. It's like maybe you want it today, but and I've not really seen anybody, and I've done this in rooms, like some of the biggest rooms I ever did it in were 300 or 400 people. It's amazing because a good portion of the room will freak out that I'm asking them to do it. Everybody does it, and a huge number of the room are crying when it's
Mm.
done. And often it's because the words that will come through are very loving and reverent of us in a way that we may not have yet learned to be within our own egos and our own. So I think it moves a lot of energy for us to connect with that
Yeah.
wider part of ourselves.
Ugh. Ah. How perfectly, how beautifully said. Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, that expanded view. And I think when I think of the healing journey, Lee, one of the we're on it for our whole lives. There is no hierarchy in it, but a way that is very clear to me that you've arrived at more of a depth of who you are is having more autonomy over your being, having agency over yourself, being able to advocate for yourself freely, having a sovereign mindset about the way that you carry yourself in the world, the way that you share in the world. And in order to do that, you have to seek your own counsel and you have to do it for your own personal sake. It's like when you're speaking to what you just said, one thing I super, super connected to was creating the patience for yourself, for the wisdom to come online. We will find, especially if you come from a traumatized background, or a background that required you to shape shift emotionally,
Mm,
we often find that it is so easy to quit. It is so easy to consider ourselves as having failed, even if it's just an afternoon. Like if you ask a question and it doesn't come in the afternoon, it's like, see, I knew I couldn't trust myself. Something's wrong with me. I need to be validating this information. Now I need to be sharing this information with everyone to see if it resonates so we'll know if it's true. But the piece of the journey that allows you to become more you is that wait time. And it is just exploring the discomfort of that wait time and making peace with it so you can reprogram how you approach yourself. But that present moment awareness, and I think, that's one of the most powerful things about being able to connect to your inner wisdom. It is the ability to be in practice with and teach yourself how to be present in your own timeline, how to stretch it, how to change it, how to shift it. Um, but really understanding how to use time in this
mm.
experience of incarnation.
I love that. And it's interesting as I'm listening to you speak about this, I'll go back to what I said. You said, when did I accept this about myself?
Mm,
I don't know. In fact, I can say I'm pretty sure that if I had not done this for a living, my journey would have been so much slower, because no matter what I was going through in my personal life, I was contracted by people to show up for them and do my thing. And one of the things I often hear, well, I hear it in two ways. There's the old classic, oh, I'm not ready for a relationship yet. I'm not healed enough for a relationship. And of course,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, 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 the relationship's going to help heal you. Don't wait for a decade. Just. And then the
Yeah.
other one, of course, is in order to be a good healer, you have to be fully healed. And I think
Mm,
that's such a myth. There are
mm-hmm.
incredible people on the planet who are incredible at what they do. And I'm not even talking about healing. They might be amazing in certain areas of their life. And that one area
Mm-hmm.
they're amazing might be their saving grace. It might be the one area they really are in their light. And then, like all of us, they're working on the other areas and trying to integrate and trying to become whole. So I think for me, there was this really interesting moment where I recognized that even though speaking to my guides and having that not just expanded view from them, but the expanded feeling I would get when I was channeling, it was actually helping me to forgive myself for ever believing that I needed to just be a constantly enlightened being, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
think I thought I was supposed to get to in the first few years. And so I was actually rejecting my humanity the same way I'd done it as a kid. So I was in better circumstances, but I was still rejecting my humanity. There were still parts of me that I wanted to reject or see as a problem. And I think the breakthrough for me came when I was like, oh, it all coexists. So, we aren't going to our higher self or our soul to try and eradicate our nasty humanity. We're actually going to that place to bring it home again and re-include
Mm.
it. And if you just do that, the rest starts to take care of itself. And if you just keep connecting with that beautiful fountain will start to show you, ooh, my shoulder's a bit stiff and I didn't know before I channeled. So I need to give my shoulder some love. And, the shoulder being a metaphor for the part of ourselves that we don't know how to hold in love. And so for me, like you, that's kind of the human journey of it all. And then that's coming from an individual perspective of mine. But if you look at where we are as a world right now, boy, oh boy, we're all in the spiritual washing machine, as a world.
Oh my God, on the spin cycle, like it is a
Yeah.
lot. And like I love so much what you're saying about that, because I think that was just such a huge piece for me too. There's this quote that a lot of us connect to and love, which is, I'm a divine being having a human experience.
Mm,
But the thing that I think that is so important to follow up in that statement is, but I signed up for this human experience. So I need to bring my divinity into my humanity and not think that my approach is to choose one, and that makes me better, that makes me above, that makes me higher. And so that's my focus. When you're on the awakened path, you're awakening so you can share that consciousness with the rest of the planet and the rest of humanity. And then we're always in practice and continually healing, because we live in an unconscious world. And so, though you come into this knowing and the mission is to share it with others, it is a complete detachment from outcome on whether it will be received.
mm, well said. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because and I think that's where, well, my guides talk, and they're called the Z's. So when I first met them, I asked if they had a name, and they said, "Well, we don't have a name the way you would understand a name, but we know that humans need names. So you can call me Zachary, and I'm the lead spokesperson." And then over the next few years, I met two others who gave me the names Zafariah and Zayadora. And for a
Mm.
good kind of 6 years, I was publicly channeling the three of them, and they would take it in turns, and I never knew who would show up. Zayadora was deep feminine, Zachary was deep masculine energy, and
Mm.
Zachariah was like this slightly comical personality based blend of the two. And so the audiences that would listen to what I did started referring to them as the Z's. So they named them, it kind of stuck. And then in 2012, they said, we're just going to speak as one collective again, because with where everything is going, it's actually unification is going to be more needed than ever before in the coming decades. And so therefore we're just going to unify, and we're no longer going to
Mm.
separate out. So but they always talk about multidimensionality, and they say that we have forgotten how multidimensional we are. So, with what you were saying, I think of, okay, the part of me that will rise to the surface from time to time, that's still the wounded child, and it's like he's ready for a new layer of healing, and the
Mm.
6-year-old in me is ready to be a bit more, okay, the world is safe. And that comes because of X, Y, or Z that just happened to me in recent months. And then of course there's the one that can focus the energy of the Z's, and they're wildly different points for me, but that's the truth for all of us. And I think that's where the healing part of what we're doing comes in. It's so crucial that we first of all can accept who we are and learn to love who we are. And as you know, and as we know, trauma does not make that easy, because
Mm.
trauma can be so painful and so immobilizing that many of us just want to escape it. And I think for many people, their point of entry to the spiritual world is getting out the body, getting out of the trauma, like finding a safe place outside. But what tends to happen for most of us who do that is there comes a certain point where spirit goes, okay, we're going to gently pour you back down into the body now, because The body is where you are supposed to
Mm.
live it and animate in a different way. And so it's why I always say that my favorite spiritual people are often the people who know nothing about spirituality on an information level.
Yeah.
They are just embodied. They love, they give, they look out for the community. The tribe is part of their focus rather than just their own life. And equally, I've met many people who are spiritually very, very informed, but they, because of their wounds or their trauma or just where they're at, they're not embodying that in the world. So, kind of going back to what you said,
Mm.
do we take this stuff in to entertain ourselves, or like I used to, it was like my healing hobby at the weekend? Or do we take this in the hope that how it transforms us actually creates a much more expanded, enlightened, and I'll say empowered version of us in the world? Can we take it into action?
Mm. 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 Mhm.
And I think the trauma that you mentioned, one of the things that I realized that I wasn't alone in, which, like many who isolate, and as a child, I isolated with my pain
Mhm.
and would hide it and would eat my way through it, or whatever else I needed to do. It was a revelation to me to go into the spiritual and self-growth world and meet so many people at those workshops that I would attend and then that later I would lead, who had the same deep levels of self-judgment that I'd carried. The shame, the self-judgment, the self-attack that I knew so well, and that I, like many who are struggling or suffering, you personalize it and you see it just as you. And then I got out and I'm like, oh my God, this is an epidemic. Like there is an epidemic of bad feeling and unkind words toward ourselves that we have all just inherited. And the Z's were like, yep, it's one of the planetary diseases. And it's like a virus and it goes round and you've all swallowed it and you've handed it to each other. You've whacked each other in the face with it. You've learned to become it in order to keep yourself safe from the
Yeah.
perpetrator in your life. And I was like, oh my God, wow. So I think if you depersonalize your own self-attack and self-judgment and recognize you're swimming in that because so many of us are, for me that was helpful. It helped me to just slightly open out my understanding of why those negative thoughts towards myself would rise again, and the fact that it's like, okay, this is part of the energy ocean and I'm in it and this is my version of it, and okay.
Yeah. 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 There is a lot of head nodding happening and people listening. I have a feeling there's some heart holding as well. When you were speaking about earlier, Lee, doing, just how beneficial it was to even grow the gifting when you started doing this professionally and really stood in your calling and stood in the way that you were, the multitude of ways you were meant to express your gifts and your purpose. I know that, something that is really challenging for people who do more spiritually led work or work that is in service to the human heart, to the human spirit, there is a big issue of feeling like you can have, like you're allowed to reap benefit from it for yourself,
Mm,
whether that is financially or personally in any kind of way. I think that there is this misbelief that a path of service means that you are on a path of martyrdom, and I don't agree with that. I believe in the
mm,
tenets of energy exchange. I believe in spiritual exchange. And I actually think it's really necessary for the transformation of even the person you're aiding in some circumstances, that they participate by also putting something forward that kind
mm,
of puts their stake in the ground, which could be bought services or any other type of exchange. But, I know you have actually a course that you're in right now, and I would just love to speak to that and speak to your thoughts on occupying space as a healer, occupying space as someone that does any type of service or work that is in the path of um, awakening of spirituality, of mental health?
Yeah, it's such a big topic. I'm glad you
Hmm.
bring it up because it's certainly one of the areas I had to navigate in my own psyche and psychology, and still occasionally today it comes up, but not anywhere near to the same level it used to. So firstly, I mean, I have a couple of friends in my life who, because of business ventures they were part of, they don't need to work, which is incredible. Like I don't meet many people who don't need to work, but
Yeah.
these two people I know, they don't need to work. They won't need to work for the rest of their lives unless something goes weirdly wrong. Um, Both of them give a lot, and I don't just mean their money. They give their resources, they give their time, they can do that, and they're in a position to do that. So there are always people who don't need resources, and there are equally, and I've seen a whole number of people who are out there wanting to use their energy exchange away from the form of money, and
Mm.
that's also a very respectable path. And there are a number of people who do that. So I just want to acknowledge those people first. But if we go to the group that we're speaking about, that I was a part of, I needed to pay my rent. Like I couldn't do this for free. I didn't come from a background where there was money. There was enough. We certainly didn't grow up in poverty, um, and I knew people and friends who I knew did. But so for me, there was this interesting moment when you're charging for a service that has enormous value to people, and I had this moment where I felt like, oh, I'm moving from a donation based reader. So I think I asked people for a minimum of £10, which was about $15 at the time, and it would take me up to 2 hours to do this reading for somebody. So I was basically equating it with kind of the minimum wage that I could earn at the time in another job.
Mm.
But after time, I realized it was tiring. I couldn't do this for 8 hours a day. Like the max I could do was a certain number per day. So I had this epiphany moment where, as I felt my nervousness about raising my prices, and every time I raised my prices, I felt my nervousness and I felt a part of me contract. I reminded myself that I was the guy who was going to workshops using a bank loan. I had taken out a bank loan, and I valued those workshops so much that
Yeah.
I was willing to spend
Yes.
£300 on a 3 day, because to me, it was changing my life. So I thought, anybody who values this work, they are the people that you're working with. Anybody who doesn't value this work, or who has a problem with you charging for it, they aren't the kind of
Yeah.
mindset that you would sit with. And my bigger vision was, if I can use my sessions to build something, to have enough money to employ people,
Mm.
basically the dream that I had, I'm in it now. I'm 18
Yeah.
years later. Um, my work employs about 24 to 20, puts money in the pocket of 25 people and their families every month. They're not all full time. And then, more importantly to me, I would say 95% of the people who receive my work, they receive it all for free, and none of it's free. Like, nobody works for me for
Exactly.
free.
Yes.
So I am spending, my podcast, I spend about 30 to $40,000 a year making that
Wow.
podcast happen. And we don't have a
Mm.
sponsor, we don't have
Mm.
millions of views on YouTube, so there's no revenue coming from that. So I actually managed to create what I wanted, but that was my vision. And so money was needed and was required. And I think there is a very small contingency, and you'll see them out there on the internet, who will leave a scathing comment about the fact that anybody's charging.
Oh, I
And
got a thought for this.
yeah, and it's a really interesting one, because in my first years, when I was a bit younger emotionally, and not physically, but also emotionally, and a bit younger and a bit wetter behind the ears, I think I was a little afraid of some of those people, and would check myself against their judgments. And now I'm like, God love those people. because I would hate to be in a position where I'm spending my life out there criticizing what other people are doing. I'm
I
like,
know.
wow, for them, focusing on something they want to resist and push against
Yes.
and
Yes.
attack, that's their
Yes.
life. I can't relate to that. I've never
Yeah.
related to that. So I have to go. That is the price of putting your work out into the world. There
Yeah.
will be people who won't like you. There will be people who will judge you. That will happen. You can't avoid it. What you have to do is get clear about what your why and your what. And so when I held an event for entrepreneurs in 2018, had 65 people come for 5-day training with me in San Diego. The event was called Impact the World, which I later named the podcast. And incredible people, like from all over the world, some of them already doing quite well. I presented, there were about 25 sessions in that 5 days, or 26, and I think I presented 20 of them myself. There were 2 that focused on money. The energy in the room dropped on both of those sessions in a way that I couldn't believe. That
Mm.
everyone got kind of scared and contracted, and it wasn't because I was presenting badly. I I checked myself. I was like, no, you were the same pitch as all the other sessions where they were laughing and excited and expanded. But as soon as we brought money into the room, you could feel our hearts clamped and we got nervous, and it
Mm.
was great because I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember having that in me and this having to work through that. So the reason I created the course Own Your Value a few years ago was because I recognized that's one of the first stumbling blocks that we have. And it's not just about money, it's about being able to, even if I didn't fully understand how I was doing what I was doing, if I had rejected all of the positive feedback from other people, I would have
Mm.
basically just been in self-sabotage. I didn't
Mhm.
fully understand it. I was thrilled it was working for them. I certainly wasn't walking away going, "Oh, great, I know how to do this thing for them." I was just listening to them. They were telling me about my value. They were feeding back my value. The work I had to do was to meet it and to
Mm.
understand who I needed to be and what growth areas did I need to go through to embody my mission. And so, if I died tomorrow, I'm so grateful I was able to go through the growth path of doing this work, because I might not have been able to, and I might not have had the right people around me, but I'm
Yeah.
so grateful I did, because I'm like, wow, look at where it ended up, and look at how many people get affected for free, even though I'm spending what we have in the business in order to
Mhm.
do it. So it's, to me, that's beautiful. So I think you have to get clear, and you have to do some work on yourself to get clear about your why, and
Yeah.
to know where finance is aligned with your mission, and also where finance might be showing up as a wound, not just
Yeah.
the wound of I don't deserve this. But I've equally met other people who come out the gate and they haven't got a following, they haven't built an audience, they haven't offered value to people yet. And they're like, well, I'm charging $500 because I'm worth that. And I'm
I
like,
know.
do we have any proof? Do we have
Yes.
any evidence?
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
like, I understand the part of your ego and your mind that says I'm worth $500, but any customer has to agree with you, has to choose you based on your value. The
Yeah.
power is in the customer's hands. So work with that relationship.
It's interesting too that you said that final piece, because I think, that's some of the toxicity that came from this era that we are kind of inching out of this idea of a girl boss or a
Mm,
boss, or,
mm,
we just came out of this huge, really like 7-year expanded kind of experience around entrepreneurship, and this,
mhm,
big move to a lot of people, everyone, founder this, like we've been in the age of sell yourself in the bio of your social media, and always do it with kind of sketchy old school marketing style, right?
right.
Like there's a difference between fake it till you make it, like hold yourself like you deserve to be there, but not fraud, right? Like you don't want to
Yeah.
be fraudulent, with people. And I think that point you said is so important. we have just spent several years looking at memes that actually I think are doing such a disservice to younger millennial and Gen Z people entering the workforce. There's been a lot of people who have never reached actual business success, but their template is that kind of marketing system of I'll coach you to have clients, even though I've never had clients aside from the people that I'm coaching to have clients.
Yeah.
And, it's like we've been reading a lot of things that like go in there, ask for double, sis, see what you're made of, or go and apply for the jobs that you're not actually equipped for, because, that might be for you. And it's like, no, 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 that's tricking people to hire you for things you can't do, which is very different from looking to expand and elevate yourself based on what you're capable of doing. And so it drives me nuts when people just say, yeah, I think I'll charge 250 for this. No, I'm going to just say 500 because I'm worth it. And it's
Yeah.
like, none of this is sustainable. It's not sustainable even for our economy. And it's creating this, this fast paced, I think, earning for people in a way that is just about them consuming and buying things for themselves. And it doesn't actually make sense, and it's
Mm.
not sustainable, and it's not in integrity with what you're delivering for people.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. And also, you know, again,
I
it's
think
like the
about that a lot.
no, no, it's the isolation of what I'm worth is really bad business, because
Yes.
business is a service customer exchange. Like, it's to do is do you have, and again, I'm using the terminology customers because we're talking about it. You could, have to say, you could use people or clients or whatever you want to use. But one of the things I say about customers, like, I'll give you an example that I talk about in Own Your Value. When I'm on Amazon going to find something, and Amazon suggests some things for me, and I have the time to click on one, I don't purchase something out of pity for that person,
Right.
or worry about that person's fee. Oh, no, I should keep reading the product description because I feel bad for the person who wrote it. No, I just go, no, this product description, nothing in this for me. I'm not resonating. As
Yeah.
customers, and this is what I teach in Own Your Value, we are correctly self-centered. If we are going to give something to you, we are correct in being, well, what am I getting out of this? What's
Yes.
this for? And that is the piece that you have to understand. Like, with your people, where are you giving them value before you want to
Yeah.
charge them value? Which is why I think it's so, we have this incredible system now with the internet where you can put various things out there online for free, and people can taste test you. But if
Yeah.
you're only doing that in a manipulative way, if
Yes.
you're like, here's the first minute of my presentation, now click here, like, the people who are going to sign up for that are either easily manipulated,
Yeah.
low self-esteem, they don't really
Yeah.
know what they're getting into. Is that the client base you want to work with? And so I think authentic marketing
Mm.
requires fully
Mm.
understanding who you are and what
Yes.
you're here for. And I
Yes.
saw a guy yesterday, so interesting, something came across my radar, a newsletter, and his whole marketing pitch, he starts his method with saying what's wrong with the self-help industry and
Mm.
how he's solving it. And I was like, wow, I would never go to that, because I don't want to. But you know who will? All the people who agree with what he finds wrong with the self-help industry. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's just, everyone's different, and we all need different things. And there are so many
Yeah.
groups. There are so many people out there who would love what you do, but it's not so much about you being validated or you getting paid a certain
That's
amount. I mean,
it.
that'll
That's
help a
it.
little bit. It's actually about, are you in an exchange that you can go to bed at night going, well, I feel like today was a good day? Because trust me, as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you're going to have a whole lot of learning and a whole lot of challenges and days that are more stressful than others in certain ways. But if you can ultimately go, it's worth it. This
Yeah.
is, then you're in a good place.
You said something that I thought was so powerful for everyone to hear. I'd like to sit here for a second. This idea of even even in that kind of exchange of goods, consumer, offering consumer, everyone is living their lives out of their wounds, but that affects every facet, including what you choose to buy, how you treat people you're buying from. And that's a part that I think, being in this space, that I think is really interesting, because we're attuned to that more than most. It's like if I'm looking at a certain review or a certain email of feedback, and based on the languaging or based on, the way it was written, the second I read it, I'm like, oh wow, your caretakers really let you down in your childhood. I see that.
Mhm.
Or I see that you're searching for an authority figure, or I see that you're looking to express unkind behavior because of something else happening in your life. And like we see that all the time in traffic, right? Like people that cuss you out and try to hit you with their car because you didn't let them over. Like people do things in that kind of anonymous space, I've noticed, to let off the steam of their deeper wound. And I had this experience myself, Lee, that was just so, it was just so interesting. When I moved my podcast over, when it got acquired by Black Effect and by iHeart Media, I received an email from a woman that was so charged with negative energy. Like she was upset. And the email was so, just highly passive aggressive, just very leaky with
Yeah.
the energy. And I remember what she wrote was, Devi, your show has changed my life. I love your show. I listen to it every week, but I am sick of how dare you have commercials? Like she literally said that to me. How dare you have commercials? To listen to your show and then all of a sudden be thrown to a commercial was, very upsetting for me. And I just have to say, I'm not going to listen to your show anymore. And then it was like very kind of like, just bless her, just catty at the end. It was like, sincerely, my sponsor, God. And I was like, girl, what?
Right. Right. Right.
I read that email, and obviously that does not, affect my existence, and it's not going to stop me from the work or from earning money for the things that I do in the world. But it was just so interesting, that for this person who does not know me, has never met me, has no idea about, my lifestyle, my responsibilities, my worth, the idea that you would tell me that I'm providing something to you that is changing your life, and you think that I should not earn money for my expertise, And I think
Mhm.
it's just interesting because people, obviously, you're just acting out of your wounds, but the energy you're putting out doesn't affect me, but it affects you and your life and the things that
Mm.
you're able to magnetize to you and the way you're able to build and grow. Because, the fact of the matter is, I'm a 15-year broadcast professional.
Mhm.
I caught the bus and interned to my first radio job for multiple years. Like I've done big, expansive work in this industry that allows me to do this show. And this show is a passion project for me. I'm not earning a ton on this show. I do this show because I believe in sharing information. I know it's my calling from God. And I did this show for 2 years for free. So this idea that I'm not actually charging you. You're still getting this show for free. But because you have to listen to a 30-second commercial, my work is now devalued. And I'm somehow deserving of this, quote unquote, intended tongue lashing.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. And it's like you see where the wounds are. Or last story, I received really expansive and beautiful reviews on this podcast. One I came across rated this podcast at 1 star and she said, I love this show. This show is so incredible. It's making me a better person. But every time I try to listen, the audio cuts in and out. So I'm giving you 1 star.
Yes, yes, yes.
As if I
The computer.
somehow have control over your technology.
Yeah.
My show is my show. How it gets to you is based on you. But the idea that you would take your time to try to, give a little injury or create something that ruffles someone else, that you're saying you value. It's just fascinating. It's just interesting. And you know, everyone does it every day, whether it's at the McDonald's, the Starbucks, someone show that you actually look up to and you're deriving benefit from. But it's interesting for each of us to look at that and see how we receive that from others, how we may be doing that to others without realizing, and stop leaking energy on people, especially if it's people that you're saying you value.
So true. And, I have my own versions of some of those stories. Uh, we have never experienced so much negative kickback in my company uh, until we had a guest on Impact the World. Um, and we had a certain guest on. I will say this guest was lovely, really pleasant to deal with, and most of the time the guests that we have on are great, but occasionally people surprise you. You're like, oh, you're not like the person on the video. Oh, okay. And then the camera goes on. Oh, now you're the person on the video. That happens.
Ah,
So it's always very interesting, I think, to meet the difference. But there are some people who have a very different persona on a stage than they
yeah.
do when you meet them, and that's always a little shocking and a little disheartening. But you eventually just get used to it, and you never quite know who you're going to get. Well, the kind of hatred that came the way of me, my team, and this guest, because they were angry at this guest we had chosen because of a video that she had created that we didn't know. And it was a political video that she had created. And I hadn't seen the video. And
Mm,
based on some of these comments, I would say neither did the people who were angry about the fact she did this video. Because I even went to this guest after all this attack. There was this huge kind of, ugh, and I didn't know who these people were. I'm like, you say you love the show, you say you love the work. You would never
mm,
speak this way. You would never be
right,
like coming after my team members, me or this person with pitchforks, because that's what it
right,
was.
right.
And I'm like, wow, you're so emotionally inflamed that you think it's okay to turn on us for a show that we have been providing for you for free for a year and a half,
Yeah,
and that we put
yeah.
time, money, energy into. And so I think
Mm.
first and foremost, unless you work in the field, like I love that Brene Brown quote. She said, unless you're in the arena, I don't want your feedback. If you're a fellow speaker or a fellow teacher or someone who's on YouTube, she will consider your feedback. But if
Mm.
you're not somebody who's out there doing the thing, then you
Yeah,
actually have a very limited view of what it
absolutely.
takes, what it costs, all of those things. So I think there's that piece. But I think
Yeah,
more than anything, what you've shared and what I'm sharing, this is where the growth comes in putting your work into the world, because
yeah,
you have to get to a place where you're like, oh, there will be people that I can't quite believe what they said, or I can't quite believe the way they would think it's okay to behave. And that's okay, because
yeah.
they will be a smaller percentage, but it also trains you to know what's okay and what isn't. I did a statement to the people on Facebook about this guest, and I kind of was basically saying, no, no, this is not okay. Like, you're welcome to say all this, but no, here's why what you're saying is completely out of alignment with how the values of my work line up. And so if you're going to try and argue that, here are my answers to your arguments. And it was
Mm.
it was a great boundary moment for me, because I was like, yeah, no, you don't, none of you get to own me in that way.
Mm-mm,
I'm thrilled that
mm-mm.
I get to do this, but no, none of you get to own me in a way that you get to speak to me or my team or this guest, who was very pleasant and also said she had experienced a barrage of hate because of that one video she did. So it was an interesting time,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, absolutely. Mm, I'm glad we got to have that
We are
conversation on the
complicated, we humans,
show.
and it's all
We
about
just
how we
that
navigate
way.
it, I think.
Yeah. Lee, tell me about the latest book that has arrived this month. What was your
Yeah.
inspiration for this book? You know, you've been a very prolific writer and artist for many, many years. And your latest book, Conversation with Disease, Book One, The Energetics of the New Human Soul. Ooh, that title off top chills. What is this latest book about?
I have a copy here, so I just can't help but hold it. There's
Yes,
always
put it
like
in the
that.
camera.
There's always that thrilled part of you that it exists. It's like, oh my god, it became real. Well, the funniest thing is the only books I have written so far, this is the second, and there's a third one coming next spring, which is book 2 of Conversations with Disease. They're channeled. So I actually feel like I don't have much say in it. There was no plan to write a new channeled book, but I did ask Diana Edwards, who is a psychotherapist and a real spiritual old soul. Like she's read so many of the books. She's very in it. She's very aligned with spirituality in a very deep way. She and I have been friends for about 5, 6 years, and she would have occasional conversations with Disease when we'd meet up.
Mm.
And she was a wonderful conversation partner for them. So I said, Di, would you mind if we did some recordings for my members community, the portal, and we'll give them a conversation each month. And that was it. That was all we were doing. And lo and behold, by the end of day 1, where we recorded the first 3 hours worth of conversations, uh, I just went back to the cottage I was staying in that night and just this needs to be a book. And so that
Mm.
was kind of how it all began. And then the Z's were like, "Oh no, this is a book series, and there's going to be a number of them." So I'm loosely holding that, going, "Okay, well, we're working on 3 right now, so we know there are 3."
Mm.
But yeah, it's this very interesting blend of a grounded but spiritually well-educated psychotherapist asking more earthbound questions to the Z's.
Mm.
And she's very good at picking up on things they'll say, because the Z's, as they've said, they speak in circles. Because they say anything that we say is circular and it can link to all of these other circles. So you might
Mm.
ask one question and 7 things are given in the answer. And Diana's very good at identifying what the audience might want to hear next. And because I have no control over that when I'm channeling, it's like, where do they want to go? So
Mhm.
it was a really fascinating process. And I'm really heartened to hear from the first people who've read the book, who had also heard the audio, because the audiobook we retained as the original conversations rather than re-narrating it. I wanted the energy of Diana speaking to the Z's the day it happened. Um, they've testified that there's an intensity and a peace in the book that matches the audio, and you never quite know how it's going to translate. So that's kind of how this book came to be, and it's called
Mm.
The Energetics of the New Human Soul, because they're really talking about who we are becoming as a society
Mm.
and who we are set to become in the coming decades and what's going on right now. And they talk about this battle that we're in between. They say you can think of it as an energy war, and it has really become very aware, very known to us. That's why we're in such an awakening. So, they'll say
Wow.
it's not an easy time to be alive, but it's a thrilling time to be alive because of the transition that we're going through. So
Mhm.
it's very interesting to hear their perspective on it all.
I cannot wait to dive into that. I can't wait to just be in personal, private conversation with you again and to ask questions.
Me
So
too.
that book is now available in stores. Everyone can connect to it. And I also want to really highlight to the course that you're running this month as well, the Own Your Value, and highly recommend to anybody that feels called. Um, really exploring your relationship to your value and to the way that you own your gifts, your purpose, who you are, and the way that you share it. Lee, how can everyone connect with you in your work?
Yeah, if you go to my website, leeharrisenergy.com, you'll find everything there. We also create music, new age music that's
Mm.
spiritual in nature, but also kind of quite modern in other parts. And the book is available at Amazon. And I have a YouTube channel, Lee Harris Energy, too, where every month I do an energy update, which is a free, usually 30-minute video where I get themes from the Z's every month of usually 7 to 8 things that we're going to walk through.
Mm.
Doesn't mean all of us will walk through every one of them, but usually people are quite resonant with at least a few themes. So I expand on those themes and how to navigate them and what they might look like and what they might feel like. That's probably the most popular thing I do, and that's every month at the beginning of the month.
Mm.
But yeah, leeharrisenergy.com is where you can find all of it.
Yes. And the IG, everyone, you want to watch those YouTube videos. And one of my personal favorite offerings of yours is your newsletter. So I highly recommend that people connect to your newsletter through your website. Lee, I adore you with my whole soul.
Oh,
Thank
I
you
love you,
so
my friend.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
coming on the show.
Thank you. It's my honor. And thank you to everyone listening and watching. And if nothing else, I hope you take away from this conversation that you can sit and have a conversation with your higher self or your soul for a couple of minutes a day, and let that energy really move through you, uplift you, and expand you. It certainly changed my life to do that.
Mm, perfect. Oh, that was so good.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Debbie.